Should I swaddle my baby? And this is something I get questions about a lot. This is something that I see on social media a lot. I see the two camps. I see the sleep trainers who are recommending swaddling babies all the time, all night, all for naps. And basically, I've heard moms tell me that one of the sort of rules in their sleep training program is to swaddle their baby. And often those swaddles that are recommended are more of that sort of straight jacket swaddle with the arms down and like super tight. And then on the other spectrum, I see lots of sort of sleep consultants, sleep specialists who are more holistic and who don't use sleep training, who are actually talking totally against swaddles and saying that basically swaddles are bad for infant development because they hinder the expression of the Moro reflex. So, of course, it's 100% understandable that you're confused as to whether swaddling is good or whether swaddling is bad. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that in today's video, and also just to sort of reassure you that there is no sort of black or white on this, okay? And my own professional clinical opinion is that swaddling can be very beneficial for the right baby and also the right situation or circumstance. Okay. I just want to throw the caveat there that if you are swaddling, you do need to put your baby on their back. You need to make sure that you have a safe sleep environment. And when your baby starts to show signs of rolling, which can be as early as about 8 weeks or so, then you need to stop the swaddle just for safety reasons. Okay. So let's start with this. Historically, swaddling has been used all over the world in various cultures for thousands of years, with the goal of calming a baby and reducing night wakings by promoting a deeper sleep. And so, as I mentioned, this has become very controversial. And one of the things, in addition to the fact that, I've heard that swaddling prevents the Moro reflex from being expressed, which then prevents it from being integrated. I've also heard, crazily enough, from even healthcare professionals, and I'm kind of hesitant to even say, but occupational therapists, I'm like really disappointed in them, to be quite honest. But they have gone around saying that swaddling causes sensory processing disorder, which is like, oh my gosh, way to stress out parents. So if you have heard this, please rest assured this is not true. If you haven't heard it, then just ignore what I just said. So swaddling is something that I recommend on occasion. Remember, I said for the unique baby or for the specific baby and certain circumstances. So if you have a very sensitive baby who demonstrates those big startle reactions and becomes really easily upset by them, or if you have a baby who's really upset and fussy and really has a hard time calming, then swaddling can be really, really helpful because it does have the calming. It does have the inhibition of the Moro reflex, and we'll talk about that in just a sec. But it also provides a lot of deep pressure, which is calming and organizing to the central nervous system. Sometimes swaddling is also really helpful in order to help you get a few, and your baby get a few solid hours of sleep, which if you have a baby who is waking every hour or every 2 hours and you are no longer able to sustain that because you're just totally exhausted, totally sleep deprived, and you need some immediate support to overcome that sort of sleep crisis, to feel like you can manage to get 4 hours of sleep so that you can feel like a new person, then you know what? Maybe you do swaddle your baby just so that you can get that extra sleep. And so this is one of those things too, where you kind of have to think about your own mental health and your own self-care as well. That being said, even though I do recommend it for certain situations, I also find that swaddling doesn't work for many babies. I will say that in my own personal experience, my son hated swaddling, and he would literally get out of any swaddle I tried, and no matter how tight it was. And my daughter loved it. And I actually had to take her swaddle off around 3 months because that's when I started to notice that she was rolling. And that ended up being a whole little bit of a disaster. But anyway, so two children, same family, totally different in terms of their enjoyment of being swaddled. So from my perspective, based on development and also neurobiology, here are 4 reasons why swaddling may be helpful. So, the Moro reflex, or that startle reflex in babies, is hugely active in newborns, and it doesn't really become integrated until 3 to 4 months. And for some babies, that big startle is really upsetting and wakes them up. The swaddle helps to prevent that startle or that reflex from fully being expressed to the extent of like really waking them up all the time. And while swaddling does or may in fact inhibit that Moro reflex while they're sleeping or while they're needing to be calmed, because swaddling can also be a really great tool to use when your baby is not sleeping, when you just need them to calm down for, let's say, feeding, or just in general during the day if you have a really fussy baby. Um, and so, even if your baby is being swaddled, let's say all night long, you're still going to be unswaddling for feeding, but also during the day, your baby is not going to be swaddled. So, they're going to have many opportunities to go through that startle reflex to help integrate that startle reflex as well. So for example, during diaper changes, feeding, playtime, when you're holding them during the day, or even when you're holding them at night, like maybe you're not swaddling the entire night, right? Um, and so your baby does have plenty of time to start sort of going through that Moro reflex in order to integrate it in a 24-hour period. So just swaddling at night is not going to be harmful in terms of not allowing that to be fully integrated. The next point is that babies are born with a very C-shaped spine. And I've talked about spinal curves before, so you can go and search those videos on my YouTube channel. But they really like to be in that kind of curled up fetal position. And so putting baby to sleep on their back in an extended position with the arms and legs out is actually quite unnatural for them. And let me ask you this. I don't really know a lot of adults who spend the entire night sleeping on their back comfortably. Often we are switching our positions as well, right? And so um, this kind of extension is really unnatural. And especially in those first few weeks of life outside the womb. And the swaddle, when done correctly, because, with the whole back to sleep campaign, so we do put our babies on our backs to help with SIDS and all of those things, which is like a whole other topic in and of itself. So you can go and search that on my YouTube channel as well. But the swaddle, when done correctly, it actually helps to mimic that curled up fetal position, especially if you're swaddling with the arms close to their hand. So this is why I like the swaddles that allow their hands to kind of come up this way. There's usually material here that kind of prevents them from fully startling out. So it kind of keeps them in this, so they can get their hands to their mouth, they can be in this position, versus the swaddling that keeps the arms down in that straitjacket style. And so it really allows your baby to keep that kind of curled up fetal position, which can be helpful. Okay. Helpful in helping them feel more protected, but also just more comfortable in terms of sleep as well. And actually, in some parts of Europe, they actually recommend babies to be placed on their sides to sleep to encourage that kind of more fetal position. And then, of course, they recommend switching sides each night. Of course, if you're doing that, you are not going to be swaddling because that is not safe. But that tucked position is a very safe and comfortable position for babies. Third, swaddling also helps babies feel similar sensory input than they had in the womb. Warm, tight, cozy, against gravity. And then they also have something to kind of kick and push against, just like they did in the womb, but not too much, right? Like they can push a little, but not too much. Again, why I like those swaddles that have the arms kind of up here and still ability to move those arms, but not fully express that startle reflex. And so when babies are born, they really have to learn about gravity and this newfound freedom of movement, along with all the other sensory pieces in their environment, from lights and sounds and touch sensations. And the swaddle can really be helpful in terms of soothing and calming by mimicking this kind of womb-like space. It also provides deep pressure, which is proprioceptive input through the muscles and the joints, which has a very regulating and organizing and calming effect on the body. So there's that piece as well, which is why swaddling can be useful for calming a baby even when they're not sleeping, okay? Swaddling can also regulate a baby's temperature when it is done right. So ideally, your baby is dressed in maybe just a diaper or a short sleeve onesie when being swaddled, rather than like long sleeves, fleece, all of that kind of stuff, which can potentially lead to overheating quite easily. But babies are not able to regulate their own temperature, at least in the first few months. And so swaddling can potentially help to support that temperature regulation for them because, again, they're in that nice fetal position, they're nice and warm, they're all curled up. Okay, so you might be now thinking, okay, fine, this kind of makes sense. So why is swaddling so controversial? So I've mentioned it, that, there's that controversial piece of the fact that the moro is not going to be fully expressed and therefore the baby is not going to be able to move through it and integrate it properly, which I've kind of talked about. Um, and then the other sort of downfall that I hear people talking about is that swaddling promotes deep sleeping, which it does, but potentially it promotes too deep of a sleep. And so baby won't wake up, let's say, to like feed. And so it might impact your breastfeeding relationship. This is where you really need to look at your own baby. So for my daughter, she loved being swaddling, but she still woke up every 3 to 4 hours to eat. So I wasn't worried that she wasn't getting enough nutrition at night. And so you kind of need to think about that in terms of your own baby, but also the other case is true too. There's lots of babies out there who are not being swaddled, who are sleeping 8 hour stretches right from the beginning, like those sleepy newborns. And so that also has the potential to impact breastfeeding. So that's not necessarily, in my opinion, an adequate kind of discussion against swaddling because really you're looking at your own unique baby. Um, so again, my recommendation is that swaddling can be useful depending on the baby, depending on the situation. I also think that you need to really be mindful of doing it safely and maybe in moderation. So I mentioned my kids have different kind of ideals of swaddling, but you really want to make sure that the hips are loose and free so that baby can be kicking their feet, they can move around because if you're swaddling around the hips, that can lead to hip dysplasia. Um, what else did I want to talk about here? I'm just looking at my notes. Yeah. So I think I've talked about everything. So depending on you, your situation, your unique baby, you now have the information to make your own decision, which is what motherhood is really all about, right? Is kind of taking this information, this information, this information, this information, and you're really making your own journey based on what feels right and light in your heart, what feels right for your situation. Okay, so if you have any questions about swaddling, please feel free to comment below. I've got blogs on swaddling, I've got other videos on swaddling. I do lots of discussion on swaddling. I have linked my favorite or one of my favorite swaddles in the links below. If you wanted to have a look at what this kind of swaddle looks like that I've been talking about in the videos. And if you are not in my free group, Sleep Deprived Mamas, Holistic and Heart-Centered Support Without Sleep Training, then please come and join us. The link is along with this video in the, wherever it is, under, over, I'm not sure. Okay, that's it for me today. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye for now.